Hey guys, what's up? Jay Lai here. Today we're going to be talking about terms of trade. Well, terms of trade, or TOT for short, refers to the relative prices of exports in terms of imports. And mathematically, it is the ratio of an index of a country's export prices to its import prices. And it is given by this equation. Okay, terms of trade is equals to average price of exports over average price of imports multiplied by 100. And note that the prices of exports and imports are both measured in terms of the domestic currency, just in case you're thinking about whether the currency needs to be changed if there's exports and imports. In this case, everything is measured in its terms of its domestic currency. Now let's look at some terms. What does an improvement in the terms of trade mean? Okay, well, this is an increase in the value of the ratio of average export prices to the average import prices. And it involves a fall in the opportunity cost of imports. Now, the way you think about this, if you look at the equation here for the terms of trade, okay, it is the average price of exports over the average price of imports. The kind of thinking here, if you hark back to your memories on the current account, is imports is kind of like you're spending money, right? And exports is you're kind of earning money from abroad. So for everything that you buy, surely you need to finance that by exporting more. Okay, and here it's ceteris paribus, we're ignoring the financial account, okay? But that's the kind of thinking behind this. Therefore, if the prices of exports increase, okay, which leads to an increase in the value of the ratio, which is an improvement in terms of trade, that means that for every import that you buy, you would not necessarily need as much exports to cover that import. I repeat again, when the price of exports increase, okay, let's say it doubled, then you only need half the amount of exports to cover the same purchase of imports, assuming that quantity stays constant. An improvement in the terms of trade, as in an increase in the value of the ratio. How do I increase the value of this mathematical expression here? Surely it's when the average price of exports increase or the average price of imports decrease, okay? The price of exports goes up when the TOT improves and or the price of imports goes down. Let's look at the deterioration in the terms of trade. What does this mean? This is a decrease in the value of the ratio of average export prices to average import prices. And again, it involves an increase in the opportunity cost of imports. We'll get onto that for a moment. But remember, the terms of trade mathematically is the average price of exports over the average price of imports multiplied by 100. So therefore, a decrease in the value of the ratio is only brought about by either the fall in exports, okay, which decreases the numerator here, and or the increase in price of imports, okay, and this makes that number smaller. And the reason why it leads to an increase in the opportunity cost of imports is because, again, using the current account kind of concept, for every import that you purchase, you must kind of earn that money through exporting. Therefore, if the price of the exports decrease, that means you need more exports to cover that 1 unit of import, ceteris paribus. Let us clarify some concepts between the terms of trade and the balance of payments, and it is very easy to get confused, okay? Don't confuse prices with values because they are two different things in this case. Whereas in the case of terms of trade, we only care about the price of exports versus the price of imports. And on the other hand, balance of payments is about the balance of trade, which is the value of exports minus the value of imports. It is easier to understand the distinction when we look at the formula, because the price of exports is only PX, price of imports is PM, whereas balance of trade, the value of exports is PX multiplied by QX, okay, the quantity of exports, and the value of imports is the price of imports, PM multiplied by QM. Let's look at a mathematical example. The terms of trade equation is given here, and here the base year is 2015. And the terms of trade for the year 2015 is 100. This is where we're starting from. Suppose that in 2020, the index for export prices is 105, and the index of import prices is 110. Calculate the terms of trade in 2020. All we need to do is just plug in the numbers, okay? And you can see when we plug in the numbers that the answer here is 104.76, which means that there is an improvement in terms of trade, since 104.76 is greater than 100. So, therefore, an increase in the ratio of the index of average export prices to index of average import prices shows an improvement in the terms of trade, whereas a decrease in that ratio shows a deterioration in the terms of trade, just to allow you to remember this. And so what are some of the causes in the changes of terms of trade for the short term? Okay, so this may be caused by changes in demand. Increases in global demand for a product causes its prices to increase, and decrease in global demand causes its prices to fall. Some changes in demand may occur over relatively short periods of time for a variety of reasons. For example, this may be due to changes in consumer tastes. Okay? For example, if people suddenly prefer furniture made from wood rather than from plastic, then there will be an increase in the global demand for wood and thereby an increase in its global price. And secondly, changes in global supply. Okay? The prices of internationally traded products also change in response to sudden changes in supply, which can occur due to a number of factors. So one of which might be the restriction in availability of an important input in production. And an example of this may be rare earth. So say that there's a reduction in the supply of this input of rare earth, it can have major impacts on the supply of silicon products, where it is critical for its production, over a period of time, causing its prices to increase. Changes in the domestic rate of inflation relative to other countries. Price level changes to a country relative to other countries can have impacts on its terms of trade. A higher rate of domestic inflation means that the country's export prices increase relative to its import prices, and this results in an improvement in the terms of trade. And at the same time, this corresponds to a deterioration in terms of trade of countries that import goods from high inflation countries. And here we're going to look at some of the causes of changes in the terms of trade which are long-term in nature. First of all, might be because of changes in exchange rates. Exchange rates fluctuate continuously over short periods of time and affect prices of both exports and imports, and hence this will impact the terms of trade. If a currency depreciates or devalues, the price of imports can increase in terms of the domestic currency. Okay? Note that, however, that the prices of exports remain unchanged in terms of the domestic currency, okay? Because it always gets reconverted back, okay? Secondly, might be because of growth in incomes, and this may affect global demand. Economic growth and increases in incomes are an important long-term cause of changing demand patterns, which affects terms of trade. As income increases, the demand for goods and services also increases. This might be due to changes in productivity, okay? Productive tends to increase over long periods of time, okay? And when you have a more productive economy, okay, what happens is that supply would increase at each and every price level and allowing you to maybe export products at a lower price, okay, and hence affecting the terms of trade. Technological advances have a similar effect on the terms of trade as an increase in productivity, okay? And technological advance may be through the use of more AI or more kind of advanced technological techniques or kind of more automation, okay? Will lead to a rightward shift in the supply curve, which is an increase in supply at each and every price level, and this will lead to a lower price over the long run, okay? So the export prices will go down, which may lead to a deterioration in the terms of trade. And the last point here is trade protection. Imagine if you have a small country, okay? That small country may not play a major role in global trade, and therefore it may not be able to influence world prices. In other words, if you remember the knowledge that you have gained from international trade, the country faces a flat, perfectly elastic supply curve. However, if a country has a large share in the world market for an import or export good, right, and it imposes trade restrictions, okay, then it may be able to affect the level of world prices. Let's just say that the US, okay, it's probably a huge importer of potatoes, and let's say it has a tariff against potato makers around the world, then because of the sheer volume that it purchases, then the global average price of potatoes would increase, okay? And in this case, the terms of trade has actually deteriorated because the price of imports has increased, okay? And therefore making more expensive to buy these imports.